We had a roundtable last month, with some really impressive experts discussing the efficacy of lockdowns, the use of face masks in the general public, the need for in-person schooling, the role of immunity through infection and vaccination, and many other COVID-19 related topics. The panelists on that roundtable were Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's a professor of medicine at Stanford University, a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research, director of the Center on the Demography and Economics of Health and Aging at Stanford University. He holds both an MD and a PhD in economics from Stanford, and he's published in peer-reviewed scientific journals in medicine, economics, health policy, epidemiology, public health, and statistics, cited over 10,000 times in Google Scholar. We also had Professor Sunetra Gupta, who's a professor of theoretical epidemiology at Oxford University, awarded the Scientific Medal by the Zoological Society of London, awarded the Royal Society Rosalind Franklin Award for quality of scientific research. Among her work with infectious diseases includes malaria, HIV, influenza, and bacterial meningitis. She's also a novelist and a translator. She has a consolidated body of theoretical work on the evolution of pathogen population structure, which establishes a novel pipeline for developing a university flu vaccine. The technology has been licensed by US startup Blue Water Vaccines following a successful preclinical study. She's been cited over 17,000 times in Google Scholar. We also had Dr. Martin Kaldorf, who's a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, a biostatistician and epidemiologist in the division of pharmacoepidemiology and pharmacoeconomics at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Research centers on developing and applying new disease surveillance methods for post-market drug and vaccine safety surveillance and for the early detection and monitoring of infectious disease outbreaks. Another major research area, spatial and spatiotemporal disease surveillance, for which he's developed various scan statistics for disease cluster detection and evaluation and for early detection and monitoring of infectious disease outbreaks. These methods are used by many federal and state agencies and around the world, as well as many local public health departments and hospitals. He has been cited over 25,000 times in Google Scholar. We also have Dr. Scott Atlas, who's the Robert Wesson Senior Fellow in Health Policy at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. He was Professor and Chief of Neuroradiology at Stanford University Medical Center for 14 years. He has been investigating the impact of government and the private sector on access, quality, and pricing in healthcare, innovation, and economic issues related to the future of technology-based medical advances. He served as the U.S. As a senior advisor for healthcare to numerous presidential candidates, counseled members of Congress, and was on President Trump's White House coronavirus task force. And so we had, I think, an hour and 45-minute discussion, covered a lot of different issues. All the different experts were able to weigh in on theirs. Obviously, many cited research, and many people really appreciated being able to have that type of discussion, because you don't really get that in most of what we see day to day. You may get a clickbait headline, you may get someone to tweet something, but this was a way to ask questions, have a discussion, and also a way to inform some of the policy decisions that have been made in different states and to cite that. Now, Google and YouTube have cited the insights of these experts I just discussed as being misinformation. Now, they say it's misinformation, even though Google and YouTube routinely host conspiracy theory videos ranging from the cause of the 9/11 attacks to the role that 5G networks play in causing COVID-19. You can pretty much find any misinformation under the sun on Google YouTube. Now, Google YouTube has not been, throughout this pandemic, repositories of truth and scientific inquiry, but instead have acted of enforcers of a narrative, a big tech council of censors in service of the ruling elite. And so when they took down the videos that were posted by some of the local news outlets here in the state of Florida, they were really continuing what they've been doing for the past year: stifle debate, short circuit scientific inquiry, make sure that the narrative is not questioned. I'll ask the experts this, but the consensus that we see is somewhat of a synthetic consensus, because there's experts and scientists who disagree with the consensus, who realize what the data said, but they don't want to stick their neck out because there is serious consequences that a lot of the folks like the Bhattacharya, like the Kaldorf-Gupta, all these people have had to deal with as a result of following the data. One other point, I think, in this, when the YouTube clip of the roundtable was pulled down, and this is something that's not new, you had those corporate media outlets, particularly the New York-based corporate media, they were very favorably disposed to that censorship. And some of our biggest media conglomerates who claim to be avatars of the First Amendment and free exchange of ideas, they've really become cheerleaders for censorship. If something doesn't fit the overriding narrative, then in their view, it's better that it get left on the cutting room floor. It's best that you edit it out of existence rather than actually tell people the truth. So I think what we're really witnessing is Orwellian. It's a big tech corporate media collusion, and the end result is that the narrative is always right. Well, I don't think that that's what the American people want, certainly people here in Florida. So we have folks back again to be able to address this and some other issues. And so, Jay Bhattacharya, why don't we start with you? Just what's your response? You saw that this was something that was taken down. You've obviously participated in roundtables here in Florida with me, but also have been involved on all these COVID issues pretty strongly for the past year. And I know this isn't the first time we've seen censorship of this. So what's your response to what YouTube and Google did?
Yeah, I think from a scientific point of view, it's absolutely terrible for science. For science to work, you have to have an open exchange of ideas. And it should be, if you're going to make an argument that something is misinformation, you should provide an actual argument. You can't just take it down and say, oh, it's misinformation without actually giving you a reason. And saying, look, it disagrees with the CDC is not enough of a reason. Let's hear the argument. Let's see the evidence that YouTube used to decide it was misinformation. Let's have a debate. Science works best when we have an open debate. And Governor, I also agree with your interpretation of the role of the media in this. Censorship is not consistent with American norms. The American norms involve, again, free exchange of ideas. I think our conversation around COVID had been deeply sort of enfeebled by this sort of notion that there's some things you can and cannot say. I think in the roundtable that we did last March, or the end of last March, I think we did our best to try to evaluate the evidence as it was. You can evaluate arguments. Maybe we were right. Maybe we were wrong. That's how science works. You do the evaluation based on the evidence. And, if someone presents to me better evidence, I'll change my mind. That's what my obligation is as a scientist. I think the censorship is an enormous mistake that has been made in throughout this entire year. This idea that you have a narrative that you have to follow has been an error. It's sort of made it more difficult to address the epidemic in a meaningful way.
Martin Kaldorf, your response to YouTube censoring the roundtable?
I'm very worried about the future of science, because science is dependent on free exchange of ideas, and it has been for 300 years now. So if this continues, this kind of attitude with censoring certain scientific views, then I think we have reached the end of 300 years of enlightenment, and that would be very, very unfortunate.
Scott Atlas, censorship, YouTube taking down the clip, your response?
Yes, Governor. I obviously, I think this is so harmful. It's harmful when you have a lack of the ability to say what you believe in general, because we will never arrive at the solutions to problems. There will be other crises. It's not over with this pandemic. There will be another pandemic. There's almost no question about that. There will be other crises. And the way you arrive at the solutions is to be able to seek the truth and state what you believe the evidence or anything else has been showing. And then there is a debate. And this is really a pattern that we have now in the United States. It's not just in the media, it's on academic campuses. When you have this sort of censorship among universities which are supposed to represent the sources of critical thinking in this country and perhaps in the world, the US universities. And then you have these sort of attempts to censor or ad hominem rebukes, this kind of thing that has happened to me personally, but also others. It doesn't just stop the scientific truths from being arrived at, it stops excellent people from being willing to state what they believe, to be willing to serve in the government, to be willing to help the country. There's nothing more dangerous than being able to censor what is said in a country, because then you are simply not ever going to even hear the truth. And you are entering into a phase of countries that we used to criticize severely, like the USSR, like communist China. I mean, what is going on here? I have been personally censored many times, both on YouTube and on Twitter, for quoting sources like the World Health Organization. I mean, this is almost the end of our civilization if we have this sort of censorship, I'm afraid.
I would just note that there's the video from March of 2020 that's still on YouTube, where Dr. Anthony Fauci said there's no reason to be walking around with masks in the middle of an outbreak. There's a clip on YouTube from the World Health Organization. This was filmed by WHO before COVID, but they say only symptomatic individuals should ever wear a mask. And then there's also a clip on YouTube from another WHO expert, Dr. Margaret Harris, just saying, we don't recommend wearing a face mask unless you're coughing and sneezing a lot. So I take it that is still up. Obviously, I think YouTube would say that because you guys have said similar, that would be misinformation. And so the idea that you're censoring is ridiculous, but it obviously isn't even being done on an even basis. To see a very reasoned, very intellectual discussion that we had last month with obviously people that are very strong, and not that the credentials mean you're always right, because obviously we know that that's not the case. But when you look at you folks, Dr. Gupta, these are folks obviously that are very serious in terms of either epidemiology or public health policy, and for them to try to take it down, they actually took it down off local TV stations here in Florida who had posted it up. So it was also taking down some of their. I think it was really, really troubling. Now we've recognized the problems with how big tech has been conducting itself. We're going to do something about it in the legislative session this year. And I think this is just another reason why we need to do what we were doing when tech really started exploding in this country with the internet and the ability to do all these things, which you didn't even have social media at first. That came later. It was really very liberating in many respects because you kind of had the legacy media, which obviously had a certain perspective. And this was a way where people could go around that, interact, share ideas on a variety of things, not just something like this. And so these were really liberating platforms. Yeah, it seems like in recent years, they've shifted from being platforms to really welcome debate to platforms that are censorious and that are seeking to be enforcers of the ruling class's elite narratives. And that's a much different job. And I think they've not been able to do it in any way that's principled. Obviously, there's other videos up that would be much more problematic than anything that was said on that. But I think what they're trying to do, I don't think it's principled. I think it's ultimately, these are massive, powerful private companies that are basically in service to propping up whatever the narrative is at the given moment. And so it was disappointing to see it, but I'm glad that we're back. We're not going to be silenced. We're going to make sure that folks get to hear from some of the great experts in the country, and also be able to actually hear what the data has revealed over the past year. And of course, I don't think that the anti-lockdown stuff should have been censored last March. Of course not. But to do it now, after we have a year of experience and shows the shortcomings of these policies, man, that's really, really troubling.